And this is KEXU 96.1 FM, Pole People's Revolutionary Radio. I'm JV.
I'm your girl, Tina Marie.
And we are here in the studio for Free Aztlan. And we have a very special guest today. We got the Comrade CJ from MIM Prisons. MIM Prisons is the Maoist internationalist movement for prisons, ministry for prisons. And we got the Comrade. Welcome back, CJ.
Thanks, good to be here.
Absolutely. And, CJ has been here. Some of you remember CJ been here a couple of times, and he keeps, he'll keep coming, and he brings us the latest updates from different developments, in particular within the prison movement, and all things prison, and all developments, and as well as outside of prisons as well, because MIM Prisons, keeps their finger on the pulse of, movement activity everywhere. So, it always has good information for us. And today Tina has, what is it? This is the latest issue of Underlocking.
Yes, I have my copy. Get yours.
Absolutely.
You will not be disappointed.
You will not. And you could go to prisoncensorship.org, prisoncensorship.info in order to get, you can read online the latest, news and analysis, political analysis of MIM prisons. But so, yeah, we're going to talk about a few things. First of all, for some of the listeners, CJ, if you want to briefly, explain what MIM Prisons is, and maybe a little bit about today's prison movement, what's going on behind enemy lines.
Sure. So MIM Prisons, as you already stated, is the Maoist Internationalist Ministry of Prisons. We are a Maoist, obviously, organization that serves the prison population in the United States. We came out of a long history of Maoist prison support. Our organization kind of took on the mantle of that work from the original MIM. Our newsletter, Under Lock and Key, is named after what used to be the section of MIM notes that was prison letters. So we've continued on that legacy, continued on many of the educational programs. We really expanded a lot of education programs that MIM kind of initiated, running study groups for prisoners through the mail. We've done a lot on fighting censorship. That was originally the name of our website, was kind of based around that idea of fighting censorship in prisons. That continues to be what we see as an important campaign. We can talk about that more later, and I'm going to get into reformism and picking what campaigns are working on. And it's something that's very relevant to some of the stuff going on right now. Right now in Texas, last time I was here, we talked about the Juneteenth Freedom Initiative that was about to launch. And so Juneteenth has come and passed. And most of the updates I have on that are related to, possibly the biggest, I know there were some big censorship periods in California back in the day. This is one of the biggest waves of censorship that we've seen related to letters that we've been sending in recently to Texas prisoners. Very benign letters too, and they've just been censored across the board pretty much, and very concerted. It seems like a very concerted effort. So I can talk about that a little bit more later too. But
yeah, and in prisons, you talked about the study groups, and of course I know about the study groups. I was a part of the study groups, but for those who they're not aware of the study groups, can you explain to the listeners, what the study groups study, briefly some of the topics, and also why is it important to MIM Prisons to launch the study group Serve the People programs within the prisons?
Well, for us, Serve the People is about serving the potentially revolutionary masses in ways that the system won't. We look at the history of the Black Panthers and some of the things that they did, like feeding school children, and getting into some of those realms now, I think is harder. It may be possible to do in a revolutionary way today, but it may not be, because you have so many, you have these churches and government-funded organizations that are doing these things. So to really serve the people in a context like the United States, we have a very large social democratic system with a lot of money, a lot of benefits for the people in this country in general. And then that's, people like to say trickle down economics doesn't work, but to an extent there is a trickle down of that, where people, even like the lowest of the low, can benefit from that, and certain programs that the state will sponsor to, win the masses over to support the state. So it's hard. It can be harder in a country like this than, say, 1935 in China, to find things that you can provide for the masses that the system won't provide. And revolutionary education is one of those things. And the censorship that the state imposes on our efforts to bring that education is evidence of that. And of course, the state itself, doesn't even provide, good bourgeois education for prisoners in prisons in the U.S.
Right.
So, to an extent, we do provide basic things like dictionaries and some other basic education, but most of the stuff we're sending in is revolutionary theory. And all the study groups that we run is revolutionary theory. So we're teaching people, trying to teach the basics, usually starting off with some basics of dialectical materialism, trying to understand what is class, what is nation, what is gender, kind of go over a basic overview of what our analysis of the system is, and relate it primarily to prisons, prison conditions, the conditions of the oppressed nations in this country, how that relates to the prison system and the criminal justice system overall. So that's kind of how we try to relate it to the masses that we're reaching through this education programs.
Yeah, and there's people that there's people that have criticisms, of course, of different forms of revolutionary theory. Let's say, for those who say, why Maoism? Why are you studying Maoism? And because they have not studied it, they have no concept of what it means, and so in their mind, it's from China. So what is going on? Why are you studying? It's ridiculous. And I hate to ask this, but what would your answer be? There's people that say stuff like that, like that's in China and we're here in the U.S. So what would you say to people who say they obviously don't know that Maoism is applicable, it's universal, and this is why we see it pop up in India and Peru, Philippines, everywhere. Here in the United States, for example, the Black Panthers. But what is your answer when people say things like this, like why do you pick Maoism? What would you say to them, Comrade?
Yeah, no, we get this all the time too. So it's a good question, and we constantly have to go over it. I just read a letter the other day from someone who is actually very politically advanced, has written some very good stuff, around People's War, and they understand revolutionary concepts, but they still get tripped up on following Marx, and saying, oh, why are you following this white guy? And we are our own new African theoreticians. I mean, and our ideas that originated in Africa about communalism is where we should be finding this truth. But the whatever ancient communalism there was in Africa doesn't answer the questions about how to deal with imperialism in 2022. Doesn't explain how imperialism works. Yeah. What the contradictions are that are creating the cracks in imperialism that we can use to destroy it.
Yeah.
So in Maoism, if we have a whole list of amazing books about all the great things that happened in socialist China, and we just think that's the best example that we've had so far. Just so happens it was in China.
Yeah, I mean,
And you know, there's a lot of particular aspects to what they did in China that are only applicable to China, and then there's the universal lessons that we can take. And again, a lot of the understandings of economics that we take from Marxism is universal. And then one of the the biggest universal lesson we take from Maoism is that there's a new bourgeoisie that rises within the party under the dictatorship of the proletariat. And that was a lot of big words, but it was an important lesson about how to build socialism after the stage of seizing state power. Once you have state power, okay, we've imposed socialism, but how that doesn't instantly eliminate classes and other forms of oppression, nation and gender. So how do we keep pushing the struggle forward after we see state power? And Maoism so far gives us the best answer for how to do that.
Yeah, and and a lot of critics, one of the biggest things that I've seen or experienced is with critics is that critics will point to other aspects of organizing, what have you, and that's fine theoretically, but in reality, I haven't seen none. There's been nobody's taken power. Nobody has liberated a country under those concepts. So that's an important question to ask critics is, that sounds beautiful. Has there ever been a country who has put that into in no? And it's up. And so that's the thing is, we have to see what has worked. And that doesn't mean that this is going to work, for eternity. We obviously have to adapt as we go to different social environments or what have you, social forces. But so far there hasn't been a higher development. But let me ask you, the prisoners, prisoners obviously love political science, revolutionary political science. They love the study groups. But what has been your in your interaction with prisoners, what has been your experience with the prison guards concerning study group material that is pushed by MIM prisons?
Well, it varies, but a lot of the guards are pretty consciously oppositional to what we're doing, and so they will harass people for just getting mail from us. And got a letter the other day from a leader in Texas, I believe, who is just talking about he was inquiring, because I was just mentioning all of our mail has just been censored in Texas recently because of the organizing going on there and our efforts to support and participate in that organizing. And so he addressed the mail lady about the mail that was missing, that we said that we sent him, but he received no notification that it was censored. At that point, neither had we. And so he was inquiring as to what happened to this mail, and he said she just acted very disappointed with him that he would be even reading this material. So yeah, it's a lot of times people say that they're treated, they're told that they're anti-American, which I mean,
sounds great.
But so that's seen as problematic.
Anti-police state.
Yeah.
While you're sitting in a cell.
Yeah, imagine that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So it's really just that contradiction playing out in real life between individuals. The national oppression. In a lot of prisons, it's white staff still, but in a lot of prisons it's not. In much of the South, it's largely New Africans. We got in California, it's a lot of Chicanos and Mexican prisoners. Staff running the prisons now. And actually in Texas, it's a lot of Nigerian.
Oh, wow.
like migrant, like
Hmm.
visa workers who are, because they've had real staff shortages there, and it's these Nigerian visa workers that are there. So that has another dynamic where they're, playing, they're kind of like these hired mercenaries, and really, really targeting new Africans in particular in Texas. So,
And let me get your, and I remember, studying the particular MIM, the MIM material on revolutionary feminism. And, some of the biggest lessons that I've learned of revolutionary feminism were the lessons coming out of the Philippines from the comrades in the Philippines who would, do different things in order to, you know, well, they had, let me correct that. They had great lessons on environmentalism in the Philippines, and where they would take control of mountains, block roads. They would, do different actions in order to stop, the environmental destruction. But revolutionary feminism, and if we look at, I believe the Young Lords Party had, they were, when it came to revolutionary feminism, they were actually more advanced in some ways than the Black Panther Party on the feminism. They had women in leadership positions. They had, they were addressing, gender struggles, in ways that even the Black Panthers weren't. So there's different things, and when we talk about feminism, often here in the United States, it's largely, white women who point to, Susan B. Anthony and these, what was it, the New York, the marches for, voting rights and stuff like that. But suffrage, there you go. And yes, that occurred or what have you, but at the same time that they were marching for voting rights in New York, brown and black women in California couldn't even eat in a restaurant with white women. So it's like, what's more important, voting or being able to live, walk out of your house past sundown? So that definitely the national struggle is principle when we come, because, you're going to fight for, we understand that. I understand it. But my question to you is, what are your thoughts on the Roe versus Wade situation? Stopping women from having access to their bodies in ways that they want, whether it's abortion, what have you, contraception, what have you. What are your thoughts on that?
Sure. Yeah. So we have a new issue of Under Lock and Key. It's going to be out by the end of this month of July. And some of the articles will be out, some of the articles are out now, some will be out before then. And we will be having at least a short explanation of our position on Roe versus Wade, which might be more eloquent than what I say here. But, to put it brief, so some of the theory, when you study, we've all studied the gender theory of MIM, which is actually something that's very unique. It doesn't, it's part of our Maoist theory. It's not something that really comes from Mao, although you do see snippets of it, as far back as like Ingalls talking about the relations between the genders. But something that MIM really coined, MIM is known for talking about the labor aristocracy a lot. That was not an idea that they came up with, but an idea that they really coined and really put into theory was the gender aristocracy. And to understand the gender aristocracy, you really kind of got to get into some of the MIM theory on what gender is and how it's separate. A lot of people have a hard time separating it from class, just like people have a hard time separating nation from class. But I think with gender, they struggle even more. So I won't try to explain that all right here, but needless to say, there is a gender aristocracy that it basically is part of the gender oppressor, but they aren't, it's not like the male patriarch. It's, largely women, and maybe like queer people and other gender oppressed people that are part of the oppressor nations or live in oppressor nation countries. that benefit from various things like testing. The kind of textbook example is testing, pharmaceuticals on third world people and third world women. But there's a lot of other more nuanced examples in the MIM theory on that. So coming back to Roe versus Wade, really we see this as a struggle, on behalf of the gender aristocracy. So I mean, there's no argument to be made that banning abortion is good for people. Obviously, people die from it, but we can draw parallels to universal health care in this country. Obviously, people would benefit if there's universal health care, but it's not an issue that we spend time organizing around, because it's not an issue that's going to lead to any kinds of revolutionary transformations of society. The U.S. could provide universal health care for people in this country, and imperialism could operate totally fine. Similarly with abortion, and these are both health-related issues, and we see health as kind of in this realm of gender. So abortions could be provided easily, cheaply in this country, and that would benefit people's lives and mean less unnecessary deaths. And that's a good thing, but we don't see it as a struggle that is working in the interest of the oppressed masses, the third world proletariat, which is the perspective that we try to organize around.
And you know what I noticed? That anytime they pass any kind of laws, even the gun laws, they say that they're going to do, we're going to crack down on gun control. But anything that they pass is always worked out so that it hurts brown and black people, and it supports the oppressor nation. The gun control, so-called gun control laws are a perfect example, where now they're going to do background checks going back to juvenile age. Who is that going to affect?
Mm-hmm.
It ain't going to affect.
Come on, say it.
Yeah. So this is something that they always do. This, no matter what it is, they'll find a way. Is
that legal though? Because once you become 18, like, you can petition to have the courts seal your juvenile records where they cannot access it. And I understand that they still can. They can do whatever the heck they want. But you know what I mean? I don't understand how that's even. And I know that most of the time I just feel like they just kind of mix up a bunch of words and throw it on paper, and they're like, yeah,
absolutely.
That sounds good.
Did.
Like, wait,
That's
what? Hold on. But doesn't that contradict what you said about this? Oh, yeah. But never mind that. You know what I mean? So it's like, that's definitely a violation of your constitutional rights.
And they changed it specifically so that now it is legal. It's almost like an amendment, I guess, or something. But
these people are too much.
But yeah, and that's why, we say that, we can have paper citizenship, but it really doesn't mean nothing, because, as you said, I mean, look at the prisoners who, prisoners are, tortured, they're that's supposed to be against the so-called U.S. Constitution. They don't care. They violate their own rules at will. Whenever they feel it benefits them, they will violate it and then just create a loophole to just, like you said, throw it on paper, and a judge, yes. Well, what are you talking about? We changed it, There's harmless error in that. So they do this. So it's horrible. But another question, did you have any questions for the Comrade? I
have a question, I do. So I love the paper, by the way. Got a chance to check it out. Now, I'm just curious, do women inmates have access to this when they're incarcerated?
Great question.
We will certainly send it to them. Any prisoner in the U.S. can write to us.
Okay.
P.O. Box 40799, San Francisco, California, 94140, and get a free subscription under lock and key.
Beautiful.
Now, we have, I don't have any numbers on our subscription rate for women. It's definitely a lot smaller because there's a lot fewer women in prison than are men. And you know, we get letters often usually from men saying like, hey, we need to, you know, engage women more and recruit more women. And we, you know, we don't, our recruitment is very passive overall. You know, we just wait for people to, you know, they see an ad or they find our newspaper somewhere and then they write to us. And so in a women's prison, you're less likely to find one because there's just not as many going into there. You know, it's kind of a numbers game. So, but yeah, we certainly send the women, and I think there's an article by at least one by a woman in that issue. Yeah.
Yeah, and the women, you know, I remember that was one of the things that everybody always was like, we need more women to write. You know, we need more women. It's just like to hear a woman's perspective, especially a women prisoner, when you're a prisoner. It's just, it's a beautiful thing that, you know, for example, Roe versus Wade. I'm not saying that men cannot comprehend, you know, what that means, how it affects, you know, their mother or their daughter or what have you. But it's definitely something different coming from a woman, you know, to be able to analyze it in a, you know, in a revolutionary way. I think it's almost like saying, you know, we're going to have an Asian analyze the Chicano nation or Aztlan. Like, of course he could do that. Of course he can if he studied Aztlan. However, you know, many times the Chicano is going to have certain experiences, life experiences that the Asian had not had. Or it's like saying another criticism that people have, and I've been, you know, in online battles with people about this, where people will take one quote from, let's say, Mao on, you know, uniting with certain people or what have you. And it's like, you know, that's wonderful, but he wrote that in like 1930 or 33 or what have you, at a time where even people here had not done a deep study of the social forces and the effects of white supremacy in a very thorough way. And people here hadn't done it. People across the globe probably didn't either. So it's and that's a perfect example of what I mean, that of course that somebody from another country could analyze anything, but chances are they're not going to be able to get to the heart of it as somebody who was born, raised within this oppression, in order to capture all of it.
That
right?
lived experience.
Absolutely, that lived experience. So it's another thing. But the women, you know, I remember we always discussed that. Like we want more women writers, you know, because it's you know, it's a powerful thing to see, as it would be to see youth, you know, writing revolutionary articles and theory. That would be so powerful to see youth do it. It's powerful to see women do it as well. It's powerful to see anybody do it, but it seems more important to see the, you know, the sector that is missing in anything. It's a beautiful thing to see them rise up, right? And so that's one of the things that I remember we would always discuss, like, you know, where are the women, you know, who are creating, you know, articles and stuff like this, and artwork, you know, whatever. And especially out here, it seems to me, and I'd like to ask you this question, CJ. It seems out here there's more women who are, you know, who get involved with the movement than men. You know, there's men, but it seems women outnumber men. And when I go to different actions or what have you, women are like, you know, and where's, you know, and so, you know, but in prison it's opposite. Yeah, that's, you know, I don't understand that. Is that your experience, or what do you think?
I can't deny that. I think there's some truth to that. But yeah, I think you gotta look at the numbers too. Like when we talk about prisoners, the number of men prisoners is just much larger, whereas the general population, you know, women are actually slightly higher, but about the same as men. And then there's probably cultural reasons why we don't, or, like reasons about, built into like patriarchy and gender oppression of why women might not be as likely to write to us as men. And there might be, some of the reasons why women are more drawn to political activism on the outside. I don't really have answers to all those things, but
and you raise you remind me of women who are in prison and they get in the bad side of the guard. And, I've heard stories where women, they won't even give them like, tampons and stuff when they're on their period. They'll withhold those as punishment. So men, they don't do stuff like that to men. They just, so in some aspects, the repression can be, more harsh on women, even in prison. You hear more of guards raping women in prison than guards raping men in prison. It does happen, but not as much as women, of course.
Or maybe it's not as reported as much. Not as
reported as much, but I think that guards raping men prisoners, I'm sure it happens, but I don't know, something tells me that they're probably raping women prisoners more. I don't know, but it's just they probably have more repression, maybe.
I think they're different. Yeah, I mean, I would assume that women face more sexual assault in prisons than men, but I also agree with Tina that I think the assaults on men are underreported. I would also, hypothesize that men are beaten much more brutally than women in prison. So I think it's different.
Yeah, there's different, absolutely. And
well, I'd rather be beaten than raped. So I mean,
Yeah, I mean,
it's kind of like.
Yeah.
I have another question though. So now I know this is it's prison centered. What about ICE facilities, detention centers, because that is in fact a prison. So do indigenous relatives or folks that are incarcerated within ICE facilities, can they access this? And does it come in other languages? Or because I already know just the trauma and the violence that our indigenous sisters are going through in the ICE facilities, which supersedes the brutalities that happen in the, I don't even know, how would you call it, the regular U.S., the state prisons, federal, I guess, well, because that is a federal detention center, right? The ICE facilities, aren't they federal?
It's an immigration, I think, an immigration detention center.
I think it goes under like it's the federal, is it? Yeah. Either way, they're incarcerated, right? So, but you have these women that are like fleeing violence and trying to escape and get their kids to a quote unquote safe place, which for whatever reason, there's this American dream painted, right? That we all know is a fallacy. But what I'm saying is, I feel those women probably have so much to say and so many stories because they're fighters. Not only the women that are in ICE detention centers and in those prisons, but also statistically over 80% of incarcerated women here in the US are there because they had to protect themselves or their children from like a domestic violence situation from their partner, or whether it was themselves or their kids. So you have this amount of women, what is that? Every 80 women out of 100 is sitting in a cell because she had to protect herself or protect her children because the law wouldn't protect her. So just imagine the stories that they have and that fight that comes with that. It's not usually like a petty type of crime. It's something where they actually had to protect themselves. So I was just kind of wondering what access they had, because like JV said that we don't have enough women writers, but I honestly feel if they were given the platform or knew about this, you'd have so much material, because they probably have numerous stories and just that fight. And I mean, I can only speak from myself being a woman and a mother. Just I can only imagine what they would say, but I would love to see more women in the paper, maybe different languages if you have it accessible. I think this is dope. So that's just kind of throwing it out there,
I was thinking that when JV was talking about, getting women's voices, getting the unheard voices in there, I was actually thinking, migrants is really that black, that hidden area that we just haven't broken into, much more so than women's prisons in general. But as you stated, there's an overlap there. There's women migrant prisoners, who, and I don't know too much about it. To my knowledge, I don't know that we've ever really had any penetration or access, or I don't know how the mail works.
If they would even allow this in.
They have no rights
in there. But as far as language, we did used to have a page or two of Spanish every issue. We do not have that anymore. And maybe it's a good opportunity to plug for support. We always need support, volunteers. One of the things that we lost over the last few years is regular Spanish content in the newsletter. We've lost some of our, we were talking about study groups earlier. We still run some of them, but we don't have as many study groups for prisoners as we used to. The newsletter is less frequent than it used to be. So these are all things that, we could use help with, and we would like to expand back into.
And what about youth? As JB had brought up about, getting youth involved for writing. So what about kids that are incarcerated in juvenile hall or YA? Could they access this or possibly write? Or does it become complex because some of them are minors? Or how does that work?
I mean, we would certainly mail it to them, and we would welcome anything they'd have to send. I think we have had an occasional California Youth Authority people write to us. I don't know if we've ever had any outside of California. And again, I think there might be similar, issue. I mean, there's probably some similar things there to the migrants. Of just like they don't necessarily hear about this, but there might be more restrictions on their mail. I don't know too much about it.
Okay.
And I would think, because as somebody who was in California Youth Authority, I never seen any kind of revolutionary material coming through.
How was the mail? Was it more restrictive?
No, the mail was the same. It's just that nobody that I've ever seen had ever had any kind of. I think the most that people had was Mexican Revolution, but Pancho Villa,
that they tried
Zapata, to ban. and that was looked at as what are you doing with that? So
then you send letters in Nahuatl, and all of a sudden they're saying you're
you're gang
doing gang this, gang that. What are you talking about? You crazy?
Criminalizing our culture.
Yeah,
and that's, one of the effects of colonialism. But I'd never seen anybody with that. It would get through. It's just, in order to get it to them, we would have to, have somebody or know a youth that's in there. And then, and that's a perfect time to say, hey, if anybody knows, any of the listeners knows any youth who would like to receive Under Lock and Key for free, contact MIM prisons, send the address of that youth. They will send the paper into the youth. Also, migrants, if anybody out there has the address, knows anybody in an ICE detention center, concentration camp, send the address of the person and where they're at to MIM prisons. And so we, hopefully brother Comrade can, start getting it in there, and MIM prisons can begin that work in the ICE concentration camps. But so there's no magical solution to it. It's all about who knows somebody in these spots, send the address, they will get the material. So then that means that, the community has to interact and has to, and the same thing with the bilingual stuff. If there's anybody out there who would like to interpret and volunteer in order to translate some of these articles into Spanish, absolutely. There's so many other areas that can be improved as well, but it all takes people to volunteer and get involved, and that's the thing. When you see something that is lacking, do whatever you can in order to fill that void, because it takes, every single person is doing a multitude of different projects, and you're very busy too, Tina. I know you got, so
I stay busy.
yeah, everybody, we got a million things to do, juggling, not to mention personal situation. I mean, there's just a million things that people deal with.
Personal. Oh, they want the tea. They want the tea. Come on, make it entertaining for those listeners, JB.
So, there's a lot of stuff to do. So it's, it's just, it takes people to get involved, but good one. But I did want to ask a question. We got about 12 minutes or so, 14 minutes, but I wanted to ask, what's your thoughts, CJ, on, I see people out there, who may consider themselves revolutionary. There's actual organizations that talk about scientific socialism, revolutionary nationalism. But my question to you is it ever revolutionary for a self-proclaimed revolutionary or a group that proclaims themselves to be revolutionaries, revolutionary nationalists, or even somebody who may call himself a Maoist? Is it ever revolutionary to support, for example, a U.S. president, vote for the U.S. president or governor, somebody running for governor? Is this a revolutionary? Because some people, well, we have a strategy and we have to be realistic, and to not be realistic, you're being dogmatic. I don't even know if they really know what dogmatic means, but they throw these words around that they read off of Wikipedia, and they
like
throw
the laws.
Exactly. They
throw that out there.
they throw these things out that nobody, a lot of people may not understand, so they don't question. But it's it's a bunch of BS. But let me get your opinion, your thoughts on that. Is that a revolutionary act, supporting or running for governor of California or president? Vote for this president. Is that revolutionary?
No. So I want to tie that. I want to tie that back to the Juneteenth campaign that I want to get back to, but to address it more generally first.
Yeah.
No. Part of one of our main tenets, and this should be a tenet of every communist, but like you said, you see these contradictions out there, people saying certain things. It is that the capitalists will not, you can't reform capitalism, and capitalists will not give up power peacefully. Mm-hmm. There has to be a revolution to end capitalism, and we're saying all these problems that at the base of this, the first thing we have to do is eliminate imperialism, capitalism. That's the number one problem and pressure in the world today, and you can't do that by joining up with them, by getting elected or voting people in. If people want to vote, we wouldn't kick someone out of our group for voting, but we would never promote voting for a U.S. president in our newspaper. We would, when we were working against the trying to abolish the security housing units in California, there were state senators who were, fairly friendly and in that cause. And, so in that kind of situation, we're not going to go out and campaign to get that person elected, but we might stand on the same stage as them and talk about how the shoe is torture, so you can be allies with other classes, but you have to have your own independent proletarian party in order to change things.
And there is a difference though between a senator and, let's say, a governor, right? Governor's the one that signs the death warrants to execute mostly black and brown people. A governor is the one that funds the so-called gang task force that go and just destroy communities, incarcerate, criminalize brown and black youth, targets and hyper polices brown and black communities. They fund law enforcement to, target these communities. So I think it is, I agree with you, but I think there is a difference between a governor and, let's say, somebody on a, center or whatever, that's, going to help something move along. There's a little difference, but I just hear people out there talking about, this is revolution. And then I even see different organizations where the leadership is like promoting, vote for the U.S. president. How could you, on the one hand, talk about national liberation, and then on the other hand, talk about, well, I just voted for Biden, I mean, what is this about, and to me, it's like, this is treason. I mean, this is treason to me, this is high treason. And we know what that means, but I just can't understand it, and it's very sad though when the masses, the Chicano masses of a particular, in a particular society, that are not very conscious, so they cannot see the contradiction in that, and they just hear a few words and go along with it. It's very dangerous, and I know that in history, like, historical materialism teaches us to study history so that we can learn and transform the future. I know that history tells us that in societies where this has happened, it's definitely co-optation, it's definitely forms of infiltration, and my question to people that are in these organizations that claim to be, for example, for the independence of Chicano people or what have you, and yet the leadership is talking about, vote for Biden or whoever. Like, what's the difference between them and the Democrat? There's no difference. I mean, it's liberalism, it's reformism. There is no difference. It's brown capitalism. Like, and what are your thoughts on, I mean, I've answered this before, but on the show, but what are your thoughts, CJ, on, capitalism, black capitalism, brown capitalism? What are your thoughts? What's the difference? What do you think about that? Is there a difference?
No, not really. I think, so if we take it back to China, one of the things that is, kind of famous about the Chinese Revolution was the alliance between the Communist Party and the Nationalist Party for certain periods of the war of resistance against Japan. And so this idea of the united front and uniting with the national bourgeoisie really came out of that and other experiences in Vietnam and elsewhere. So there is that potential of unity, but then of course those parties also went to war with each other. So it's not a we're on the same team. It's that we can unite for a period on a certain thing, and then later on we're going to fight over another thing because we are class enemies. And in this country, I think it's even the idea of uniting with the national bourgeoisie gets even trickier just because there's so much money and so much wealth in this country. A progressive bourgeoisie is just harder to come by, and there's so much bullshit out there that's black bourgeoisie, brown bourgeoisie stuff.
And it's hard enough, uniting with the white working class, much less the bourgeoisie. Yeah. I mean, come on, and that's very difficult, because of the effects of white supremacy in this society. And then to go past that, and it's just, but this is something that we have to talk about. We have to know, and I'm glad that prisoners, there's prisoners that are very conscious in their in these study groups and learning about this type of stuff. I've talked about groups like RCP USA before, where people in there would study their stuff and then come to find out that they were, they actually supported the U.S. war on Iran at one point, right? Mm-hmm. That's incredible. And instead of taking the stance of, I think it was Lenin, of revolutionary defeatism, was that Lenin?
Yep.
And, in whatever country you're in, if it's a capitalist country, an imperialist country, to take on the stance of revolutionary defeatism, meaning, work to undermine the oppressor nation that you may be under at all costs, no matter what country. And this is like with, the situation I see it as the situation with Ukraine as well, where, you have a lot of people supporting the U.S. Like, go in there and take them down. Like, what are you talking about? Like, they're imperialist. Like, if anything, stay out of it, but don't, you can't root for, the oppressor nation. It's just incredible. But
yeah, and too many people calling themselves Marxist Leninists don't make a distinction between imperialist countries and the third world oppressed nations, and how you relate to wars in those situations.
Yeah, it's
I did want to, in the last few minutes, just to say a few more things about the Juneteenth Freedom Initiative in Texas. For everyone who's waiting for the last hour for the updates, I don't have any big updates on what went down with the actions or strikes. Like I said, there's a lot of censorship. Some of the leaders that we've been in touch with, their mail is coming into us about a month late. And the last couple letters we sent out, the last one we sent out to hundreds of prisoners across Texas, it seemed like there was a very concerted effort by the TDCJ, the Texas Department of Criminal Justice, to censor it almost across the system. There were a couple people that got it. But
and the Chicano Power book, right? Still
Chicano
censored?
Power has been censored
State of
recently.
Texas.
Everything we send in is getting censored.
Oh.
And so these letters, these were very benign letters. This was like, Juneteenth, we're not free, boycott Juneteenth. And in this article about the censorship that had already happened previously, so it was an article about censorship. And just talking
they censored the article about censorship.
Yeah, and talking about that, just
sounds about right.
Sounds about right.
It's a peaceful boycott of a holiday, and there's no, and so it's been censored, saying it's gonna cause a disturbance or a riot. And I think that just speaks to your questions about reformism, of like, you can't even talk about a peaceful, it wasn't even a protest, just a peaceful, like, don't celebrate the holiday. And you're getting censored, saying that, you're promoting riots and all kinds of stuff just because you're representing people who they know have interests that they oppose.
And you can't even get that, but people want to dedicate their whole life to somehow, we're going to free Aztlan through voting so-and-so in as governor of California. Right. I mean, they're going to waste all their time, energy, and resources. Vote for Biden. And and we can't even, these are examples that shows we can't even get a newsletter. We can't even get a book into the prisons. And it's just, and when they say disrupt, it's absolutely disrupting, but it's disrupting the norm, which is white supremacy in Texas, right? That's what it's disrupting. It's educating people.
And to say that, they really have to legally be able to say it's a threat to safety, and it's a pretty big stretch.
Wow.
Before we go, did you want to put your mailing address or say your mailing address again?
Yeah, in case anyone wants, any prisoners listening, anyone knows prisoners, please write for a free subscription. Our address it's MIM Prisons, P.O. Box 40799. That's in San Francisco, California, 94140.
There it is. And also is there an email address or anything?
Yeah, you can email us at mimprisons@posteo.net, posteo.net.
And is there any kind of Instagram or anything out there?
Plug it in.
Gotta go
plug it all in.
There's an Instagram. We have a website, prisoncensorship.info, that has lots of information. And we do have an Instagram account that we're trying to use more often, especially for like active campaigns like these Juneteenth campaigns, phone calls, and letter writing at ULK News, on Instagram. And that's something else I want to mention is we have been trying to fight this censorship. You can, help out by writing or calling. It's Allred, where's the restrictive housing unit. One of the main restrictive housing unit in Texas is the Allred unit. And that's where kind of the center of the organizing and the center of the censorship is, even though they censored it across the state. So we have information on our website, prisoncensorship.info. You can write and call. And we're also doing a postcard campaign. If you really want to get involved, you can print out these postcards, get people to sign them, mail them in. We try to get people to mail them in from all over the country, let them know that people are paying attention. And this is a small reform, but it's we see this as a campaign that creates space for organizing for real change. So that's when we look at like what are our winnable battles and reforms that are worth fighting. It's when we're creating space for organizing that's going to move to bigger change.
Perfect. And by the way, I just wanted to say that's a very nice T-shirt there. What does it say?
Liberation.
Oh, that's what.
Okay. Liberation.
That's what we try to do here is create, as Comrade said, spaces for more liberation, right? And that's what we're trying to do. So with that being said, it's that time, and we will see you next week, right?
Yes, sir. We'll be here.
Absolutely, we will be here.
Yes.
So, thank you, Comrade, for coming in and sharing,
Thank you.
the information. Absolutely. And with that being said, free Aztlan. Oh, Mateo.
Yay!